Episode 85, October 13th, 1915. Grisly Death over the Gaiety, by James Wickham. Callboy at the Gaiety Theatre on the night of the raid. Read by Dylan Thompson. One of the most destructive of the Zeppelin raids took place over the West End of London on October 13th, 1915, when bombs were dropped in the heart of theatreland, causing great loss of life and damage to property. The author, callboy at the Gaiety Theatre on that evening, was seriously wounded. He here describes in graphic staccato phrases the scenes which he witnessed and pays tributes to the great courage shown by the actors who were performing at the time. This raid accounted over all of England for 71 killed and 128 injured. October 13th, 1915. A moonless night. London was apprehensive. Its mood was tense. Zeppelin warfare during the last moonless period had accounted for 44 lives, had maimed 180, and caused damage in the city alone to the extent of £510,672. Altogether 9 of these fearful air monsters had come and gone night after night unscathed, almost unchallenged. So far not one had been brought down on British soil. Our air defences and combative forces in the air at this stage of the war were far from perfect. The Zeppelins seemed to be having things pretty well all their own way. London was rather on edge, yet true to the carry-on policy of the British nation, the West End, it seemed, did not lack gaiety on that October night, as I made my way along the Strand to the Gaiety Theatre, where I had recently secured the post of callboy. Restaurants were crowded. From behind the heavily curtained windows of the big hotels there came the sound of merrymaking. The popping of champagne corks, the pulse of dance music, heady laughter. There were toasts, farewells, tears, promises, kisses. War? Tonight? Blighty. Tomorrow? Who cared? London, capital of the empire, had everything in the way of pleasure to offer her sons on leave. Theatres were flourishing. House full boards hung round their entrances every night. At the Gaiety we'd been playing Tonight's the Night to packed houses. What a striking contrast to the gloom and dimness of the streets was the glamour within the thronging theatres. Soft lights glowed in their auditoriums. There was a surge of lively, tuneful music, bewitching choruses, frivolous songs, provocative dancing, smart quips, war burlesques. Almost impossible, amid all this light-hearted gaiety, to realise the horrors being enacted 100 miles distant. Had it not been for the ubiquitous khaki, in stalls, in pit, in gallery, the war would have seemed even more remote. In the shadowy streets, for the defence of the Realm Act in regard to lighting was being strictly enforced, crowds jostled and shouldered, khaki everywhere. Newsboys vociferously proclaimed the latest news from the front. I bought a paper. Gallant Serbia hard-pressed, streamed the headlines. Street vendors cried their wares by the feeble light of oil lamps. A barrel organ fumbled with the melody of the moment, keep the home fires burning. Some distant clock chimed the hour of 7. A beam of light swung across the sky. And then others. They crossed and recrossed in fantastic patterns. Some of the people in the streets occasionally glanced upwards, at the ever-moving shafts uneasily, but the majority went their various ways unheeding. We Londoners are adaptable. Groping our way about darkened streets, sweetening our beverages with saccharin, and buying the diminutive Sunday joint with the aid of a food card that we had accepted with characteristic stoicism. In the majority, we were accepting the danger that lurked above in moonless nights in the same spirit. I had been at the theatre for nearly an hour. Overture and beginners had been called. The curtain had risen on Act 1. As I walked down the corridor, breathing a sigh of relief that my duties were temporarily finished, the waves of laughter greeting the quips of Mr. George Grossmith and Mr. Leslie Henson reached me. London was enjoying itself. But then London did not know that 3 hours earlier an urgent message had been flashed from France to the War Office that 5 Zeppelins had been noticed making for the East Coast. I heard it from Jupp, the stage doorkeeper. We often heard things of that kind at the Gaiety. Marconi House was next door. "Suppose they're coming again tonight," grumbled Jupp. I glanced out of the door across to the west. There was a perfect trellis of searchlight beams raking the blue-black sky. The pavements were still crowded. Shadowy groups gossiped at street corners. Omnibuses and taxicabs, dimly lit, loomed up from and receded into the enshrouding gloom. A clock struck 9. 20 minutes to go to the first interval. A few minutes later I heard my name being called. It was the stage manager who wanted me. "Just run across to the post with these letters, Jimmy," he said. "We've got a special rehearsal call for the morning and they must go off tonight." As I went out of the stage door I met Billy, the page. "Come over to the post with me, Billy," I said. He was a bright little lad of 15. I was 3 years older. Only too glad of a little relaxation, he readily agreed. The nearest pillar box was at the top of Catherine Street, which lies immediately opposite the stage door of the Gaiety, and together we crossed Aldwych and made our way alongside the Strand Theatre. I stopped for a moment to light a cigarette, carefully screening the match. Billy waited. "They say the Zeps are on their way. The swine," I remarked. As though my words had released 10,000 furies, there was a sudden crackle of anti-aircraft gunfire, and simultaneously a dreadful sound that London knew only too well, a sound like no other on earth. It was the mournful wail created by the velocity of a descending bomb. In the one brief terrible moment before the impact, I instinctively knew it was coming directly where we stood. I was not wrong. It exploded 3 yards from where we were standing. It flung me against the wall next to the pit entrance to the Strand Theatre. It sucked me back again. It dashed me to the ground. Masonry fell, glass rained. I felt unhurt, only dazed. Yet I had 22 lumps of shrapnel embedded in me. They carried me downstairs into the bar of the Strand Theatre. The streets were pandemonium. I asked for Billy, but he'd been blown to pieces. I could hear screams in the street outside, the dull, vibrant thud of more bombs. Others were brought in and laid beside me. Some were moaning, some calling for missing friends and relatives. Someone rushed in and said a London General omnibus had been blown to bits in Aldwych, opposite the Waldorf. It was true. More injured were brought in. They were carried on theatre boards. There was a ring of ambulance bells, the imperious clang of fire alarms, and above it all a terrible insistent thudding. More bombs. Death, destruction. Would they never cease, this agonizing rain of death? They held every card up there. It was so easy for them. The stories of that night are terrible ones. The Zeppelin, it was the L-15 on her maiden voyage to England, had manoeuvred herself into line with the Strand and travelled eastwards, dropping bombs at short intervals. 2 fell barely a second before the one that hit me, in a narrow street running parallel to the Strand between the Lyceum and Covent Garden. The little street was crowded. As the first bomb exploded, people were flung in all directions. One woman was blown to pieces, another was cut in two by a sheet of glass blown from a shop front. When those in the vicinity who were unhurt recovered sufficiently to lend help, they found 38 people prone on the pavement, in the roadway or the gutters. All round was the glitter of glass. It lay everywhere in millions of pieces. There was an old orange seller who had been standing at the gallery entrance to the Lyceum. She lay huddled dead against the wall, still clutching her wares. A man from the audience had hurried down the staircase into the street when the firing began, leaving his wife in her seat. He never returned. He was instantly killed by a flying fragment of shell from our own anti-aircraft guns. One man, terribly mutilated, yet still clutching a glass and sandwich, was discovered half inside and half outside a public house, whose walls had been shattered by the explosion. 9 other people in the saloon had been wiped out. A barmaid was killed. Every theatre, there were 5 in the immediate vicinity, was used as a dressing station. Here, where suddenly tragedy had taken the place of earlier hilarity, doctors attended to wounds. There was an irony in the shrapnel-riddled boards that hung forlornly on the side of the Gaiety, proclaiming, "Tonight's the night." Mr. Leslie Henson worked valiantly to calm the audience when the terrible din occurred outside the theatre. Many rose in alarm. Chorus girls stood transfixed on the stage. Some were on the point of running into the streets in their flimsy attire. Mr. Henson saw all the dangers. He ordered the orchestra to strike up a rollicking tune. He led the girls in a lively dance. He cracked jokes and struck comical gestures. The situation was saved. Within a mile of the Strand, 19 bombs in all were hurled. One hit a home for Belgian refugees in Aldwych. Another narrowly missed Somerset House. Another fell between the walls of Divorce Court and Bankruptcy Buildings, Carey Street. Many of the beautiful 16th-century stained glass windows in Lincoln's Inn Chapel were smashed by a third. A 4th damaged Gray's Inn Hall. But nowhere in all the areas visited by the 5 airships that night, Hythe, Hertford and Croydon among them, was death and destruction, worse than in the Strand.
Upon his shoulder, the right hand again. I go.